Hello and welcome to The Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2014 to 2016 series, New Suicide Squad. I'm not entirely sure why DC Comics decided to basically reboot their Suicide Squad comic barely halfway through the New 52, but I guess in all honesty, they had basically tried to do just that already twice before. Most likely, given the less than stunning reality that was the first New 52 Suicide Squad comic, as you can see in my breakdown from last week, which I highly recommend you watch first if you haven't, DC was just well aware that they needed more than pointless violence in half-naked Harley Quinn to sell their comic. So following the chaos left by the Forever Evil event, DC seized the opportunity to revamp the whole series with a new look, a new style, and a new name. See, they even put new in the name. So does the new series live up to all the newness claimed, or is it just more of the same? Let's find out and take this away. The comic opens with Vic Sage, Treasury agent, being hired on as the new director of Task Force X. Vic Sage is a name longtime DC fans will recognize as The Question, but fans of that character, don't get your hopes up. It just seems to be a name drop here. Vic is apparently coming off doing some good work reorganizing the Treasury Department, and so the powers that be in Washington are hoping he can somehow do the same for Task Force X. So we open on our series with Vic discussing how great of an idea the Suicide Squad is, and how it's nearly impossible to screw up. Which feels to me like some tongue-in-cheek humor poking fun at the previous series, since it was honestly kind of a screw-up. This possible self-aware criticism only continues as we move on to how Vic Sage has changed the team, and an emphasis on the Treasury part of his past looks into improving the image of the Suicide Squad. The image of a team he himself admits is supposed to not exist as far as most of the world knows. But we still get this new squad, with the already popular and successful duo of Harley Quinn and Deadshot being joined by Deathstroke and the Joker's daughter. This new pair is not drafted in the regular way of being captured and then forced into servitude. Instead, Sage invites them into the team, even paying Deathstroke's mercenary fees. The only logic that I can see behind this decision is a self-referential one, with Deathstroke and Joker's daughter being like extreme versions of our already successful squad characters. So in the real world, they bring an image that someone like Vic Sage might see as potentially being able to lead to big sales numbers. In continuity, however, it doesn't make much sense for them to be here. Deathstroke I don't really see essentially lowering himself to the level of the squad, and even if he was willing to for the money, I can't see Vic Sage, a money guy, knowing that the squad wasn't going to be something that made money, honestly willing to spend the exorbitant cash on such a high-profile mercenary. He seems like he'd be more of a cutting cost kind of guy. The foursome are also joined by Black Manta, who was introduced as essentially forcibly joining himself into the group at the end of the previous series. When he thought Aquaman died during the Forever Evil event, he lost his purpose in life. So now, he's looking for some new purpose in order, and is hoping to find it as part of the Suicide Squad. He obviously hasn't read this comic. Just how bad of a team this group makes becomes quickly apparent as they head out on their first mission in Russia. It goes about as monumentally bad as Waller predicts it will, even though it was supposed to be a simple smash and grab for some intel. But the group is interrupted by Russia's secret project in the war against superheroes, some giant robo-men called the Rocket Reds. Wait, what? Really? Gross. With the mission exploding in their faces and it becoming clear that Waller and Sage have no clue what they're doing, the squad goes underground to escape Team Rocket. Here, Deathstroke is recruited by the Russians and some guy from a corporation called Mars Systems that built the Russian red shiny robots, and lets himself be hired into working for them. Which, what? Deathstroke's need to fulfill his contract is always so inconsistent. In some stories, nothing will stop him from completing his contract, and in some stories he shrugs it off at the drop of a hat. Meanwhile, Harley and Joker's daughter fight constantly, and with Manta having to treat them like children, which admittedly, they do act like. Harley spends a lot of the arc pouting and throwing tantrums, and JD does the old copycat routine. Harley eventually just beats the crap out of Joker's daughter, which does at least have a nice little one-liner calling back to her origin story. Deadshot, meanwhile, got caught and tortured by the Russians and the traitor Deathstroke. Harley and Manta show up to save him, but only barely manage it, with Deadshot having to partially rescue himself, though in doing so he discovers that his aim has been destroyed by the beating he's taken. So he doesn't join the team on their next outing into China. Instead, he goes through therapy and an issue with some absolutely awful art, like this. What is this? Just, ugh. So now, Harley and Manta are joined by Captain Boomerang in the new 52 version of the Reverse Flash. And, 2 Ninja Man bats. Sure. Why not? Again, their mission is a mess as they attempt to blow up a factory full of failed attempts at making superpowered people, and Harley accidentally sets them all loose. Even once they blow the joint, they're forced to run and hide from the last survivor, a Chinese Superman equivalent, in a fake Chinese version of Metropolis that exists for, some reason. I think it exists mainly so we can get this recreation of the iconic Superman saving Lois from a falling Daily Planet globe, but this time with it being the last surviving experiment saving Harley. We also see Reverse Flash has some performance anxiety, as he was supposed to plant the bombs in the factory as quickly as normal Flash might, but he isn't quite up for the same level of speed, and trying to get that fast causes him to literally burst his kneecaps. Pretty gruesome. For their third mission, things get a little real as the squad faces off against the superhero world version of ISIS. This is presented in a splinter group of the League of Assassins, calling themselves just the League, who feel the original League is too soft for their taste, and now they have taken over entire unspecified, possibly Middle Eastern countries to enforce their radical belief system, even on the children. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Where this gets back to the comics is the League also now has their hands on tech from supervillains, because a crazy terrorist cult wasn't scary enough. To find out just what tech, the squad is split into 2 teams, with Manta, Deadshot, and Boomerang going undercover to join the League, and Harley, Reverse Flash, and now Parasite set to provide outside help, if needed. Oh, it'll be needed. Each squad member has a different attitude toward joining the League. Boomerang can't stop wanting to have fun, treating the League with the same irreverence he has for everything, which consequently gets him thrown into the dungeon. Deadshot just wants to get out, and Manta goes native. It seems the League is finally able to provide that order and purpose he's been seeking. We see him quickly becoming focused on the League's mission over his own, even saving the life of the League's leader Saladin at one point. The League decides to blow up a British refinery owned by a company called Corvus, which turns out to be built over a Lazarus pit that the company is running tests and experiments on. Vic Sage can't abide the attack and sends in the extra squad members to stop the League, but with the League having those super criminal super weapons, they quickly manage to overpower and defeat the squad, capturing Harley and Parasite, and sending Reverse Flash, who still isn't all that fast, flying off into the distant desert. When Flash wakes up, his communicator is broken, so he can hear Waller calling to him but can't respond. So he hears them calling him useless, which apparently finally gets him into gear. So he's able to rescue Boomerang from the most stereotypical Bond villain style death trap ever, even though earlier in the series we saw the League use much more effective and lethal means for eliminating its enemies. Deadshot had tried to rescue him as well, but he still doesn't have his group back, causing him to fail and get the League after him. Reverse Flash also rescues Harley, who had been locked up with some kids that Boomerang had tried to encourage into having fun, which is the event that earned him his punishment. Under Sean Ryan's writing, Harley pretty much has a child's mind, so she initially gets on with the kids pretty well. That is, until they see her murder dozens of guards, and their disappointment in her seems to leave her pretty traumatized. Reverse Flash gives her a speech about how he wasn't always a monster and he doesn't want to be a monster anymore, which he's hoping is enough for any of them to earn redemption. Lastly, they rescue Parasite, who sucks a lot of Reverse Flash's energy in order to power himself back up, slowing Flash down again. This is all fortunately timed with Black Manta coming to realize that the League, in the end, despite all their big talk and high ideals, are just a bunch of simple terrorists. So when Saladin orders Manta to kill himself with something called a time bomb that will send whatever it is in its radius back to the Stone Age, Manta instead fights back. Saladin still manages to arm the bomb, so the squad hightail it out of town. But the Flash can't live with this decision, realizing the town is full of people and children, so even though Parasite sucked away a lot of his speed, he runs back to grab the bomb and carry it out over the ocean, where it'll only blast some water and sea creatures back to the Stone Age. Which I guess is fine? Who needs wells and water, right? The Flash is caught in the blast and so dies? Or does he? They did call it a time bomb after all. Maybe he's just trapped in prehistory now like Batman was when he died. The third and final volume of Ryan's run sees the squad in a more personal espionage mission. This revolves around Vic Sage and his arc for the past several stories. Since being hired on to run Task Force X, he had consistently butted heads with Amanda Waller, and grown increasingly dissatisfied with how the government is run, especially seeing as his superiors consider Task Force X a big success, even though it's repeatedly failing to complete its missions. So Sage is approached by a headhunter from a company called the Pearl Group, who seem to know all about Task Force X, and they are interested in hiring him. So here we see Sage change tactics with his co-workers, becoming friendlier and asking for tours from the assistant warden, a woman we know next to nothing about, other than that Waller might find her a little incompetent and altogether too trusting. I don't even know her name, just that everyone calls her Bonnie, and that, oh, what's this? She has a nice family life with a sweet, loving husband and 2 young sons? Great. Guess who's not going to survive this comic? Yeah, this lady. That's pretty messed up, you guys. Sage uses his new diplomacy to get Waller stuck on field duty, so that she goes out with Deadshot, Harley, Boomer, and Parasite on another mission to investigate some drug dealers selling a drug that gives people superpowers. When their work goes predictably south, thanks largely to Boomerang, Waller begins noticing the links between Mars, who built her gun in the Rocket Reds, and Pearl Group, who built their prison in this building in Rio de Janeiro where they are selling the superpower drugs, and Claire Pharmaceuticals that provided the painkillers Deadshot has been on since the Russians tortured him. Bonnie digs up another link to Corvus Corps, who owned the refinery from the League. So Waller goes dark with the team and they chase a lead down to Dallas. Hey look! It's Dallas, and it's not a desert. Aw, an artist who cares. Here they meet up with an executive of Cavalry Corp, who owned all those companies, and she explains that everything so far has been connected. What? It seems all the things Task Force X had been investigating were attempts by Cavalry to build their own superpowered group. An entire plot arc that gets dismissed in a single sentence here, probably because Sean Ryan knew his time on the comic was ending. But Cavalry still wanted Task Force X out of the way, so they were conspiring with Vic Sage to ruin it. Realizing the whole situation had become a mess, the executive gives Waller damaging info on Sage to destroy him so that they'll leave her alone. Waller says this isn't over, but the executive disagrees, explaining how corporations really run the world and politicians have just become tools that don't do anything without the say-so of people like Cavalry Corp. Man, has there been, like, an actually competent industrial espionage conspiracy arc underlying this entire comic? Is this really a Suicide Squad comic? What am I reading? Waller and the gang return to Belle Reve to take down Manta and Sage, and discover that, sure enough, Bonnie friggin' died when she tried to stop Sage. That's pretty messed up, you guys. There's still an entire other volume of this series though, albeit a short one. Under the direction of Hackslash and Grayson writer Tim Seeley, these last 6 issues basically ignore everything that has happened in all previous New 52 Suicide comics, which I'm beginning to feel is a theme of this series. It sees Harley using the admittedly very clever ploy of talking to herself as a crazy person to send secret codes to a humanitarian named Adam Reed, who wishes to help them free themselves. Under some really gorgeous art with some wild and unique panel layouts, the squad then fakes their deaths and are taken to Reed's family castle to have their nanobombs removed. He has a family castle? That seems, suspicious. Nah, I'm sure he's not a supervillain. He has this lovely girlfriend, and I'm sure this apology he's giving her isn't suspicious. Oh, it is. He is a supervillain. Well, damn. Turns out he's a member of a group called the Fist of Cain, a group you will see in pretty much any DC comic written by Tim Seeley. They're straight out of a young adult dystopian novel, using an app on their phones to determine how many points killing somebody is worth, and the goal is to be the person in the group with the most points. The squad are joined in their attempt to survive this crazy castle by a group of mercenaries who were used to fake the squad's death. The names of these people are... they're all dead already? Okay then, never mind. Well, one survives, this guy named Deathtrap, who has the ability to mentally shape objects into other things, like guns, which is pretty awesome. And a little OP, honestly. They're also helped, briefly, by a British villain who was secretly working for the British government to help them form their own version of the Suicide Squad, and was touring Belle Reve undercover. His name is Hunky Punk, which I promise sounds less ridiculous if you're British. It's basically British for grotesque, which is a gargoyle that doesn't have the water spout. It's the gift that keeps on giving. The comic ends with Deathtrap going out in a blaze of glory by turning the entire castle into one giant gun, and Boomerang shows up to rescue the squad and bring them all home. The comic will then get rebooted once again for the DC Rebirth, but that's a story for another day. Far, far in the future, hopefully. For now, I need to get to the breakdown. If your only experience with the Squad is the first New 52 comic, then man, this comic is probably nothing like what you would expect. It's competently told, Sean Ryan gives each character multiple levels to their personality, not just basic character types, and the self-referential nods to real life, while not always working great for the story itself, do a lot of good for making this comic enjoyable. Unfortunately, the art is pretty inconsistent throughout the series, but for the most part, it's pretty strong. What's especially remarkable is the 4th volume from Tim Seeley, which basically reads like a self-contained graphic novel, complete with some phenomenal drawings from artist Juan Ferreira that makes it clear that they attempted to do something stylish and memorable unlike anything that had come before it. There's really not a portion to this entire part of the series that I have much bad to say about. I guess I don't particularly enjoy how Ryan writes Harley Quinn, on top of the fact that her presence here makes no sense, given she had her own series by this point where she was living in New York, especially considering that they did give a nod to that series existing because they changed her outfit to the one she has there. So bizarre. But in the end, I can only really give this series a recommendation level of high. This is the Suicide Squad comic that fans probably wanted out of the New 52, and it's sad that it took until the 3rd reboot to finally get it. Thanks everybody for watching. Sorry this is a bit late, but last week's review was held up and I wanted to make sure I covered this comic as well as it deserved, because it turned out to be pretty good. I have one more Suicide Squad themed surprise for you next week. So have a happy Thanksgiving and I hope to see you next time, right here in the Comic Cave.